What price are you paying for energy? And what price are others paying for your energy? From Moscow's Red Square to Brazil's Belo Monte Dam, energy supply sparks are flying when it comes to one of the most volatile products on the political radar. Just as the Middle East has burned with conflict because of oil, Europe is tormented by energy insecurity because of Russian-dominated gas supplies. For Ukraine, price is not always the issue. Timing plays its part. Russia's President Putin likes to negotiate gas prices as the freezing winter winds begin to swirl, reminding Eastern Europe and Western Europe that it's fine to talk tough about human rights and international obligations, but impossible to explain geopolitics to an angry electorate when they have no heating at home, at work, in hospitals or in schools. And how does industry function without energy? Putin's most potent weapon is not naked aggression, it's the quiet hiss of gas. Gas does not appear to be a dirty fuel like crude oil, but energy politics can smell stronger than sulfur. New pipelines are being constructed to reduce dependence on a single supplier, but political instability to the east of Europe leaves Europe sitting awkwardly with Russia.
There's 6 member states that are dependent on Russia for all of their gas imports, which is a quite vulnerable situation. There's also the fact that fossil fuel production in Europe is declining. Demand is still increasing, it's due to stabilise, but overall it's expected that Europe's energy import dependency will keep increasing. It's already increased from 40% in 1990 up to 53% today, and for oil that's about 90%, and for gas it's 66%. So it's very high. And this is in a context where global energy demand is set to increase by 27% by 2030, which is likely to lead to very much rising fossil fuel prices and energy price spikes and so on. So Europe's very vulnerable to those, even if it would manage to diversify its gas supplies. We face a situation of potentially a fuel bill of 600 billion euros a year by 2050.
Nowadays, Europe imports more than 50% of the energy it consumes. When we look at gas, it is around 2/3 of the consumption, which is imported. If we look, for example, at oil, there is a world market and you can transport oil by ship, whereas gas, in general, it is still very much bound to pipelines, the transport. For this reason, and also against the background of the current situation between Russia and Ukraine, our energy security strategy focuses on gas.
On both sides of the Atlantic, there was recognition that when the Russian government made the decision to annex Crimea, we had to take some very specific steps, and we did.
The European Union is an exercise in international governance and in the rule of law, whereas Russia has emerged, and I call it the new Russia, as a challenge, direct challenge to that way of life. It's not a new invention, it's a resurgence of nationalism and the use of force.
This entire event, I think, has pointed to the need for Europe to look at how it can further diversify its energy sources, and the United States is blessed with some additional energy sources that have been developed in part because of new technologies. We've already authorized the export of as much natural gas each day as Europe uses each day. But it's going into the open market. It's not targeted directly. It's going through private companies who get these licenses, and they make decisions on the world market about where that energy is going to be sold.
The role of energy lobbyists is difficult to measure because they are an intrinsic part of the policy development process, but greater transparency is needed. In September 2013, former German Chancellor Gerhard Schröder met in Strasbourg with President of the European Parliament Martin Schulz. Both are German socialists, and their meeting could be considered as a matter of friendship or party politics. But Schröder works for Russian energy giant Gazprom. He does not appear in the lobby register, and when we asked his office to comment on the meeting with Schulz, we received no reply. We also asked the office of the President of the European Parliament to comment on the purpose of the meeting. We were told it was a private meeting and that no further details would be given. There is no evidence that Schröder was lobbying Schulz on behalf of Gazprom, but there's also no transparency either.
Gazprom has a pretty strong presence in Brussels, and although it tends to be quite behind the scenes and not necessarily that obvious, I'm pretty sure they would be pacing the corridors, yeah.
What is of course crucial when we talk about energy security is infrastructure development. If member states shall be able to help each other, if need be, there need to be pipelines and interconnections. European member states have already done a lot in the aftermath of the gas crisis 2009, but the work is not finished yet.
One of the main steps that we have to take in order to get to an integrated European market is actually to invest in infrastructure, because nowadays infrastructure is actually non-existent, or maybe it's aged, so we have to do the proper upgrades of the lines. This toolkit is mainly focused on electricity, grid infrastructure. We have to deal sometimes with the opposition of the public. And this is because of several reasons. Either the public is not enough and well informed on the project. Other times they have environmental concerns, landscape concerns. Also, local communities are sometimes worried about the electromagnetic fields of the high voltage lines.
Diversification of types of energy. How does this link in with energy security in Europe?
Of course, the development of indigenous energy production is also important. In this respect, renewable energy plays an important role. What is also crucial is, of course, energy efficiency.
We need, as it was so often said, mainly during the Ukraine crisis, we need a resilient energy union with a forward-looking climate change policy. A binding 30% objective for energy efficiency by 2030 is, to me, the minimum if we want to be credible and forward-looking. We cannot pretend to be the leader as far as climate change policy is concerned if we are not becoming more efficient when it comes to energy efficiency.
Everybody likes energy efficiency. It features in everybody's Sunday speeches. Energy efficiency is a great idea on every front. When it actually comes to accepting strong European push on energy efficiency, there tend to be not quite such active support. The Commission needs to make energy efficiency more central to its thinking, because as things stand, it looks like it's going to set an objective for 2030, which is actually a slowdown in progress on energy efficiency compared to efforts at the moment. We're hoping that they might eventually actually propose something a bit stronger.
Erica Hope said it is worrying that the Commission seems to be spending public money on sophisticated and detailed analysis and then completely ignoring them. But more worrying is the snail-like pace with which Europe is changing its energy mix. What's the Commission's policy on fracking?
Well, this is a decision which is up to member states. My commissioner often says that we should at least keep the option open and allow for demonstration projects.
I'm not in favor of fracking because we don't know about the real consequences. We don't know about the end cost of fracking.
There's a lot of uncertainties about what actually is the shale gas potential, but I think most estimates tend to converge around the fact that actually at most the shale gas potential would offset declining natural gas production. But it's not necessarily going to be a game changer for the European scenario.
Fracking is by no means cheap, and it's also not just readily available. It's also a high-risk technology. You're pumping chemicals into the ground where nobody knows yet what exactly is going to be the effect of that.
There will continue to be strong push from certain member states for shale gas. The Commission obviously is looking at setting guidelines for environmentally sustainable forms of fracking, but I think in the end it might actually be a sort of a case where the public will determine what the future of shale gas really is.
We are failing to protect our borders, economies and values in the long term because of short-term profits and short-sighted trade deals. Europe needs a more energetic energy policy, and it needs it before winter comes.
We've seen a big step forward in vehicle efficiency in the past couple of years, really, driven by the cars and CO2 emission standards that the EU has put in place. I think what has basically happened is that car manufacturers did have a lot of this efficiency technology kind of waiting in the wings, but it needed the push of the policy to actually sort of bring it onto the market.
Okay, start, put it into drive, and you take the foot off the brake. And so as soon as you take your foot off the accelerator, it starts going into regeneration mode.